Welcome to the IISS this afternoon. Pakistan is a country that is confronted by multiple challenges of extremism, terrorism, insurgency, governance, and tensions in civil-military relations. It also faces acute economic problems and mounting energy and water shortages, while still recovering from last year's devastating floods. At the same time, it is a nuclear-armed state, the front line for the war in Afghanistan, and a country whose future is vital for global security and stability. And given the events in Abbottabad a week ago, some 60 miles from the capital, Islamabad, I don't think we could have a more timely discussion on Pakistan, which is in the midst of yet another crisis, both in its relations with the United States and over the role of its military intelligence community, whether of gross incompetence or collusion in relation to the Pakistan hideouts of the dead Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. To discuss these and related issues, we are delighted to welcome back to the IISS, now for the third or the fourth time, Dr. Maleeha Lodhi. Dr. Lodhi is Pakistan's most distinguished diplomat journalist. She served twice as Pakistan's ambassador to the United States and as High Commissioner to the United Kingdom from 2003 to 2008. And she has been the editor of two of Pakistan's leading national dailies, The News and The Muslim, and is currently Special International Affairs Advisor to Pakistan's well-known Jang group of publications and Geo Television Network. Dr. Lodhi is also the editor of a new book entitled Pakistan Beyond the Crisis State, which, having read it, I would thoroughly recommend to you all to understand the capacity, diversity, and resilience of Pakistani society in dealing with and attempting to overcome the multiple challenges that Pakistan is confronted by today. When we had issued the invitation to Dr. Lodhi to speak, the events in Abbottabad were some distance and some time away. So she will actually be speaking primarily on her book and particularly her chapter in the book on Beyond the Crisis State, but I'm sure she will agree to respond to questions relating to the events a week ago. Thank you very much. Dr. Lodhi, please.
Thank you. I will go there. Might be better. Thank you, Rahul. It's always a great pleasure to be back here at IISS. I spent many months here, many moons ago, as a research scholar. I'm not too sure whether they called me at that time, but it was not in this new building, it was in the old building. And I really did gain and learn so much by being here. So a very good afternoon to everyone. I know what's on your mind, but you'll have to wait for the question and answer session because I have to first speak about what's on my mind. And it's really all about, as Rahul said, I will be talking about why I felt that there was a need to put together the kind of book that I have tried to do. And I will speak a little bit about this book project and what's in it, and about my own contribution in this volume. And in the Q&A, I know what you'll all want to talk about, so we'll just have to wait till then. As we all know, Pakistan remains in the front lines of international attention. Sometimes we don't particularly like this attention, but that's a reality. We just happen to be situated where we're situated. And a great deal has been written about Pakistan, as we all know, recently. But much of this has been written by non-Pakistanis. And while we welcome this, of course, in Pakistan, much of this literature, if not all, provides an outsider perspective, necessarily. If I was writing about the politics of the United Kingdom, obviously it would not be an insider perspective, it would be an outsider perspective, however empathetic I may be. So the book really is an effort to bring together some of Pakistan's most distinguished thinkers, scholars, practitioners, to really come together and debate both Pakistan's strengths and Pakistan's weaknesses, its problems, but also its solutions. It seeks to offer an insider perspective And I think what it tries to do is to really address the kind of fundamental challenges that Pakistan faces. And in doing that, we have amongst us what I call both pessimists and optimists. Pessimists I describe as people who have better information, but optimists are those who have better judgment. So we have this blend in this volume to really try to break from a common paradigm, a common intellectual paradigm about Pakistan, which is one that focuses on all its problems. And sure, we have certainly our share of problems and really formidable, imposing challenges. But what we try to do is to put the accent also, without minimizing the severity or the daunting nature of the challenges, on also the positives in Pakistan. What are the positives that can help Pakistan, that Pakistan can leverage to take it out of its state of crisis or its crisis state? So the effort in this book is really to construct a new narrative, a new national narrative for Pakistan, for Pakistanis, so that we have what we have lacked for so many years, which is a pathway to hope. Because without hope, you cannot hope to transform the destiny of any country. So it really is an endeavor to change the discourse in Pakistan. That's what we're primarily concerned with, but also to try to influence the discourse internationally by undertaking a very frank, open, and honest appraisal of the issues at play today, all the issues. I mean, this is not a book which is in any sense a shrinking violet. It does not shirk from or shrink from discussing some of the tough issues that we are confronted with, some of which were played out only a week ago. And contributors don't always agree. But I think what binds all of them together, and we have very distinguished people. One of the people who's contributed to the book happens to be in the audience, Mudassir Malik, who's contributed an extraordinarily good chapter on Pakistan's economic challenges and how we can turn ourselves around. As I was saying, what binds all of these contributors together is their faith that Pakistan has the ability and the means to transform itself from this state of crisis to one which takes it beyond. But in doing that, in order to do that, each contributor identifies in the individual chapter the kind of bold reforms that are needed now to take Pakistan beyond the state of crisis. And I think, in a way, we sort of try to look at three different aspects of what we are going through right now. First, the historical underpinnings of the crisis today. And the crisis is a multidimensional one. And we have several chapters, including one by Pakistan's most distinguished historian, Aisha Jalal, looking at this. And we discuss our history and how we can escape the past also in a very honest manner. And the second part revolves around the issues which are all fundamental issues in play today. These are issues of governance, of political economy, political and economic management, the education deficit in Pakistan, the state's abdication of education, of responsibility for education. And then the third part really is looking at the geostrategic issues which are also in play. And really the emphasis, and I think this is what is unique about this volume and the contributions in the volume, is the emphasis on the interconnectedness of the issues, the interlinkages between these various challenges, and the belief that neither one of the individual challenges can be addressed on its own, that we need a holistic approach that is able to address all of these as we go forward. Because it's very clear how unstable politics in Pakistan has made for bad economics. It's also very clear how geostrategic imperatives have crowded out social needs of the citizens of Pakistan. So unless we are able to look at these interconnections and then address them in a multidimensional manner, I fear that even the best set of reforms that we identify will not be implemented. It would be difficult to implement these if we do not first accept the interplay between many of these issues. I want to now turn to what is the central theme of the book in a way, which I describe in the opening chapter. And this is a theme which really lies at the heart of Pakistan's current predicament today. And it's also central to Pakistan's story for the last 63 years plus. And that is of a country which is a fragile state, but a resilient society. A weak state, but a resourceful and strong society. Because we've had inept elites managing our affairs, whether these are political or military or economic elites, doesn't mean that the people of that country have in any sense, or at the societal level, we've been a dysfunctional society. The dysfunctionality has been at the level of the state, at the level of the government. And I think too often outsiders have predicated their analysis at the level of the state and the government, and therefore have been unable to see what's been happening below that. Below that level is, as I said, an extraordinarily dynamic society that has been changing. Changes that have actually been missed by the outsider to a large extent, not entirely. There are many who have written very perceptive pieces about the dynamics of social change in Pakistan. And I sort of submit to this audience that it's really resilience that is Pakistan's, in a way, central to Pakistan's story, which has been obscured by the single issue lens through which Pakistan has been viewed of late. And this has deflected attention away from the strength and the stability of its underlying social structures, which has enabled the country to weather many a storm, whether the storm has been in the shape of a natural disaster or in the shape of a man-made disaster. Here is a country which is somehow able to bounce back. It is somehow able to defy all the doomsday scenarios, and there have been many, and they come, fast and furious. In fact, I remember last year, 2010, when the flood struck Pakistan. It was often said that this is one crisis too many, and that Pakistan is now on the verge of keeling over. This is it. It's going to implode. I even remember a very famous advisor to General Petraeus saying that Pakistan will implode in 6 weeks' time. I actually happened to meet him 10 weeks later. And I said, I won't name him, but I think you can all guess who he is. I said, Mr. So I've just coming from Islamabad, just wanted to report to you, we're still around. And we somehow made it through this crisis of the natural disaster. So I think the question, it's a question of what we ask. What is it that we ask about Pakistan? We never asked this question about, and I think if any of you were to take a trip now, of course we are mired in a different set of challenges at the moment, which arose from last week's covert raid into Pakistan. But if we look at, for example, the outcome of the floods, you'll be surprised, even stunned, to see how this country was able to turn around, which is not to say that all the work of relief and rehabilitation has been completed or it's been achieved. No. But its ability to actually get on with life and to somehow defy the odds is really quite extraordinary. And I think this is something that doesn't get enough attention, and which is why people are often then, in a way, they're scrambling for explanations to sort of find out why is it that this country is able to come through and navigate these challenges. And I think that one of the reasons, I will give some examples later, but I think, as I said, the floods were a great example of how the country is able to surmount a disaster of huge proportions. And I think one of the factors is that the country has many attributes of a successful nation which its elites or leaders have been unable to leverage in a systematic and sustained manner, and to really draw from or leverage the strengths of society to empower the state. I think this kind of conversion has not taken place, which is, in a way, the greatest of problems that we face today. How can we make a dysfunctional state work better in a more functional manner when society itself has that inherent strength and allows, in fact, the state to even emerge from crisis? Because where the state or government fails, in a way, society bails it out. We've seen that over and over again. I mean, another example I would cite is when the militants had taken over an area called Swat, which is not part of the tribal areas, very much part of settled, what we call settled Pakistan, part of the Northwest Frontier Province, now called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. While the government and the military both were in a state of deep reflection about what to do, the response from society through the broadcast media was phenomenal. It started with the attack, a terrorist attack on the Sri Lankan cricket team, and then went on through a series of other developments into this video that was shown on Pakistani television, which I'm sure you all know about, of a young girl being beaten by the Swat version of the Taliban. And what was the response? The response from society was just phenomenal. People said, this is unacceptable. Enough is enough. And it was really public opinion that goaded and forced and compelled both the government and the military to respond at that time. And what did we see? We saw, in a way, the empire struck back. We saw the state push back against the Taliban forces that were, getting beyond the areas that they had confined themselves to so far. They were in a place called Bunair. They were spreading their influence, and they were pushed back. So I think if there's any doubt about the capacity of the state, even that was put to rest. The states did have the capacity to push back, and push back it did. But how did it start? It started from a public reaction to something that people found completely unacceptable and said, the whole notion of imposing the Sharia at gunpoint is unacceptable to us. And the people who were leading some of these demonstrations, asking the authorities to act, were part of the clergy. This was the interesting part of the public reaction. The public reaction was not just people in suits and ties. The public reaction was public. It came from all sorts of sections of society, including the clergy, which said that this is nowhere in Islam do you find any acceptance of the notion that the Sharia is to be imposed, as I said, by a bayonet or by force in any area of Pakistan. It's completely out of unacceptable. So I think where we try to come together, again, returning to this book, but I want to say a few more words about my own chapter, is, the book also talks about, for example, and I'll come to my chapter in a minute because I do want to finish off another thought, which gives you another example of how we see ourselves as a resilient society, but a fragile, weak state, is that the country's economic fundamentals are strong, and yet it is the poor management of public finances that have brought us to the pass that we have come. And the reason for that is very simple, meaning one can demonstrate that or exemplify it by the fact that Pakistan, even as it's lurched from macroeconomic crisis, which is crisis of public finance, there's never really been an economic breakdown or an economic meltdown in Pakistan. It's interesting. Why do the two things go together? By now, there should have been a run on confidence. People should have been lining in queues at banks to take their money out, but that kind of loss of confidence doesn't occur. Even when the macroeconomic numbers are so bad, they really are very bad. I mean, the budget deficit, the mother of all problems in economic problems in Pakistan is the fiscal deficit. It's the fiscal issue. But here too, you can see the underlying fundamentals of society or of the economy are strong, they're resilient. And again, another example I would give is that of the energy shortage in the country, which is colossal at the moment. I mean, we have brownouts at an unprecedented scale at the moment in Pakistan, electricity shortages. And yet, again, it's a question of management, because the installed capacity of Pakistan is about 20,000 megawatts of electricity. And the peak demand is about 14,500, which means that we actually have a capacity which can more than meet the demand, peak demand. And yet, we have a crisis. The crisis is one of management. The crisis is not one of either capacity or even delivery. We could do all of this, but it's really bad management, poor management at the top. And as we all know, I'm speaking to an informed and distinguished audience, that really the difference between a successful state and a struggling one is good governance, is governance. There is no mystery about it. There is no magic bullet. This is it. This is the bullet. And here, my own chapter emphasizes the need for Pakistan's politics, especially its representative and democratic politics, to catch up and reflect the changes that have been occurring in Pakistani society and that have been transforming Pakistani society for the past decade plus. These are changes that have occurred as under the impact of globalization. These are changes that have occurred as a result of greater urbanization. These are changes that have occurred when the economic center of gravity is shifted from the rural countryside to the urban centers. These are also changes which are transforming the dynamic between the state and society, between the state and citizens. The advent and the role of the broadcast media, enormous, empowering citizen, connecting people in a manner that we've not been connected before. These are entirely new things. But on the one hand, you see the dynamics of these changes affecting people and how they relate to a government, how they relate to a state. And on the other hand, you see electoral politics in Pakistan stagnating and really not keeping pace with these changes. And that sort of, in a way, puts the representative system in danger of being increasingly out of touch with the people. Now, this is a paradox. Here's electoral politics. Why should that be out of touch? After all, politicians go back to people for votes. But I think the declining voter turnout in Pakistan is one measure of how electoral politics is beginning to, in a way, disconnect itself from the needs and aspirations of the people. And because politics, and particularly electoral politics, pivots entirely around patronage and clientelist networks, this is what makes the preoccupation of those who run Pakistan patronage rather than policy. Policy is only dealt with when you have to deal with it. But otherwise, the entire preoccupation is with how to play off the spoils system and how to distribute the spoils of office. Now that then means that the system of governance is really predicated around the need to reward supporters rather than the need to respond to the needs and aspirations of people as citizens. So when people are seen not as citizens, but as simply as networks of supporters who have to be doled out the goodies that state patronage provides, then I'm afraid this system, in a way, is in danger of always producing a governance deficit. The deficit that's produced in governance is almost inevitable. Because here is a system that caters and focuses on the parochial, on the local, on the goods, as I was saying to you, which have to go to supporters and not to citizens. And it is also an approach that is inimical to the evolution of a national outlook that tends to keep everything very local and very parochial. So in order to, in a way, move Pakistan out of this patronage-dominated, dysfunctional political system, what this book argues and what I myself argue is the need for political and electoral reforms. And electoral reforms especially so that electoral politics reflects the last census, and we haven't had a census for more than 12 years. So in other words, the very demarcation of constituencies in Pakistan is based on a very old census, which allows certain kinds of parties to hold sway and does not allow change in the political system. Everything is kind of ossified and in a way almost paralyzed in that period, in that mold of politics, because we've not moved, because we've not had a census. A census is underway now, and I hope the next election and its constituencies will be delimited according to this new census, because therein may lie the possibility of change and political change in Pakistan. But I think all the contributors, and I'll end here because I think Rahul wants me to get to the questions on your mind. I think all the contributors are also agreed that the agenda of reforms that Pakistan needs, and these are economic reforms, these are institutional reforms, these are reforms which deal with some of the political issues that I was talking about, electoral reforms. None of these can be pursued, obviously, unless there is a leadership that has the political will to accept, adopt, and pursue these sets of policy recommendations, and there are several that you will find in the book. What you will not find in the book is one action plan, and that's largely because there's a diversity of opinion in this. But what you will find are a series of policy recommendations, none of which are frankly rocket science, but all of which needed to be said by Pakistanis. Because we also believe that the impetus for change can only come from within. Do-gooders from outside are do-gooders. Sometimes they don't do a great deal of good, actually, because they do their own agenda. It's fair enough. And this is not to sound ungrateful for the assistance that Pakistan gets from whichever country, but the change that Pakistan requires cannot come from outside. It can only come from within. And this book tries to play to that, or construct that paradigm, which is it's all very well to look outside, but ultimately the key to change has to be from within Pakistan. And unless there is an assertion of political will by the leadership, which is goaded or compelled or influenced into action by the citizens of Pakistan, and I will, in the Q&A give some more examples of how you see more active citizen responses than you've ever seen before. But these don't make the headlines. They're just not sexy enough. They're just not something that excites the outsider, but it excites us. We're seeing changes within that. I'll give you one example so that, I see the look of some puzzlement on people's faces. One recent example. There's an organization called the Pakistan Business Council in Pakistan. It brings together Pakistan's captains of industry, the top people the top exporters of Pakistan, the top textile manufacturers of Pakistan. About a week ago, they sat down with the representatives of political parties in Islamabad, asking them to look at some of their recommendations for economic reform, including fiscal reform, tax. Unprecedented in our history. We've never seen, we've often had the business community stay rather aloof, thinking this is none of our concern. Politics has to be, run by the politicians, and wars against terrorism have to be run by the generals. So it has nothing to do with us. We'll just go make our money. And here is the business community saying, no, we want to be active citizens. And because Pakistan's fiscal crisis is so deep and so unsustainable, they got together and are trying to influence actually the agenda for the next election. Elections are about a year and a half away, maybe slightly more, but I would think about a year and a half. And this is the time where many citizens groups are active in trying to see how they can get political parties to respond to more modern agendas, to the agendas that are needed to take Pakistan out of its crisis state. So I'll end here, and I'll take the questions. You want me to come back there? Or?
I want you to come back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lodhi. Let me begin by asking two questions. One on the book, which I hope will not be the only question on the book, and the other on contemporary developments. In terms of the first, you've talked about the resilience in Pakistani society, and we've seen that in the past. But in the last few months, especially there seems to be a rise in extremism. We've seen the assassination of the Punjab governor and the Minister for Minorities. We've seen the government succumb in a way to extremist pressure and Sharif Rahman's private members bill not moving forward. So where do you think the balance should lie in this respect in terms of the focus on counterterrorism, but also the civil society aspect in terms of governance? In terms of the second question, I think there will be several other sort of follow-up questions on this, but just to start off, how was it possible, in a way, for Osama bin Laden to be in Pakistan for what we now believe may have been several years in that sense, in a settled area close to Islamabad? Is it a failure of intelligence, or is it something much deeper than that? Thank you. The floor is open also for further questions or comments, please raise your hand and get my attention.
Well, I think the first question, Rahul, is a very good one, and you're absolutely right. There were these two assassinations. I think you meant the governor of the former governor of the Punjab, as well as the minister of minorities in the central cabinet. I think.
Can you speak up a bit?
Yes, I think what this showed, and there were many voices of resistance. There were many people who held vigils, small groups, I grant you. There were many people who were writing in Pakistan's press and speaking out also in the media, condemning these assassinations. But I think you're right. Initially, an atmosphere of intimidation was created. And I think what was lacking was leadership at that time. And that remains the bane of Pakistan. We simply don't have the leadership that should have stood up at that time. Because in a way, that lack of leadership allowed the environment, in a way, to continue in that mode for some time. But I think it would be a mistake to see that as reflecting the views of the majority of Pakistanis. It did not reflect the views of the majority of Pakistanis. People may have been cowed down for a period of time by that. But I think at the end of the day, it was for the political leadership to stand up. After all, the governor of the ruling party was assassinated. But I think the kind of leadership that was shown and demonstrated just goes to, in a way, it goes to the heart of the problem, which is that unless you have the leadership which is able to stand up, it's courageous, because the public can't always be forcing this leadership to follow what public opinion wants, which I've cited some examples, but clearly at the end of the day, you are in a leadership position because somebody's put you there, because you've got the votes that put you there. Now lead. But I think the absence of that leadership created a lot of problems. Now, as for your second question, this is a question that the people of Pakistan are asking. I think there has been an acknowledgement of what, I mean, I'm using the term used, obviously, shortcomings in intelligence, where it has been suggested by the authorities in Pakistan that whereas leads had been offered to the United States, which led them to bin Laden's hiding place, ultimately, that these leads were not followed by the Pakistani authorities themselves. And I think that question has to be answered. And I don't know, I think as I speak, the Prime Minister of Pakistan is addressing Parliament to give an explanation. I have been amongst those Pakistani citizens also calling for explanations from my country and from my government. I would like to know, as a citizen of Pakistan, what happened. I'd like to, but I think the suggestion, there's been too quick a rush to judgment. The suggestion of complicity, I think, goes much too far, and it sort of plays to a prior prejudice that people have against Pakistan, frankly. If you want to hold a country guilty before that country's even had a chance to give an explanation, it's unfair. I think we'll have to wait and see what the result of that inquiry is. An inquiry has been ordered into how is it that he lived there, bin Laden lived there undetected. Obviously, it's a big issue for Pakistan. And this is something that Pakistani authorities will look into. I mean, President Obama, in his weekend interview in one of the Sunday talk shows, did say that he did not believe that there was any sense of complicity. But I think this is for the inquiry really to determine, and I am quite sure that this inquiry's findings will have to be made public. But these are valid questions which, as I said, the people of Pakistan are asking. And I think that's more important. For me, as a citizen of Pakistan, what is more important is what's on the minds of the people of Pakistan. I think at the end of the day, we have to satisfy our people rather than to satisfy outsiders. And if we can't satisfy our own people, in a way, the rest is in vain.
I have several people who want to ask questions or make comments in front of me. I'd be grateful if you could identify yourselves. Jonathan Paris, yes.
My name is Jonathan Paris. I'm a senior fellow at the South Asia Center of the Atlantic Council in the United States and a big fan of yours. I just got back from New York and Washington, where I attended a Pakistan Scenarios conference. And I must say that one of the scenarios we came up with is precisely what the point you were making, which is perhaps what the international community might consider doing is not bailing out Pakistan when it is on the brink of economic collapse. By the way, my report on prospects for Pakistan argued that they would muddle through, they would not implode. So I am in your camp on that. But the point that this fellow made at the conference, this young Pakistani at the Institute of Peace, U.S. Institute of Peace, was if you let Pakistan on its own, they will derive the resources internally from that resilience that you mentioned and put the house in order. And in fact, he argued until they are in that position, they will not take the critical action on taxation and on the other issues that are as you say, causing such a poor mismanagement in your country.
Let me take another question as well. Jennifer Harbison, yes.
Thank you very much. Jennifer Harbison, I'm a member of the Institute. Two questions, if I may, on politics. The first is referring to your point about needing a mechanism for allowing electoral politics to catch up. And I wonder if you think that the devolution process that's underway might be a mechanism that could help. And the second question is that you served under former President Musharraf. He's been making quite a lot of noise recently. I wonder if you think that there's a rationale for his return to active politics, and if so, what do you think his chances are of actually making any kind of impact?
Okay, let me take, Jonathan, it's a great pleasure to see you. I heard about that Futures conference, and I know the three futures that they talked about. Is that better? You know, I can't sit here advocating that the international community cut off assistance to Pakistan. I mean, that would be a step too far. But I do think that what we have seen in Pakistan in the last year, for example, again unreported, is an extraordinarily new phenomena, which is we've had a year-long national debate on the absence of a tax culture in Pakistan. And I think here the role of the broadcast media has been, I mean, most politicians obviously don't like the role of the broadcast media and describe it in the most negative of ways. And sure, I mean, this is something new to Pakistan. An independent broadcast media is barely a decade old. And, you know, it is evolving. But I have to say, the role that it has played in naming and shaming, for example, what my group did was to publish an entire list of public representatives and how much tax they paid. And there were some really interesting surprises. The Prime Minister, for example, of our country doesn't own a car. Poor thing. So, you know, there were very interesting revelations. Now, these are all part of these are all part of a process through which citizens are saying, we want you to be accountable to us, and we want to make you accountable to us. So I think for me, the two critical steps that Pakistan take, I mean, we have to obviously do both the urgent and the important. I think amongst the urgent reforms Pakistan needs to take is one, tax. Something like 74% of Pakistan's formal economy is today either lightly taxed or not taxed at all. That includes agriculture, and it includes the services sector. Together, they constitute 74% of total GDP. This is unacceptable. This is unsustainable. This cannot go on. So I think the more voices that will be heard in Pakistan itself to ensure that we have the ability to tax ourselves is the first thing. The second thing we need to do, it's on an emergency basis, is to create the ability to educate ourselves. No country is going to go anywhere if it finds that half its people remain illiterate. I think what this current government has done is to ensure that education has become a fundamental right rather than, you know, but that's a nominal, it's a good thing. I think it's a good step to do, that the constitutional amendments that occurred a year or so ago now enshrine in the Constitution access to education as a fundamental right for citizens. But we've got to go beyond that. Obviously, we have to make sure that education is accessible to those who don't have access to it. I mean, these two by themselves will begin to create the dynamic of change that Pakistan so badly needs. But I think again, I'll come to partly to answering the question that was asked, the second question, which is how do we bring about this change? I think some of it has to come through not so much devolution. Yes, devolution is one sort of level at which this could occur, but more importantly, it can come about in the near term through electoral reform. And the International Crisis Group has a report out recently, and I would commend that report. I would recommend that to you. Have a look at it. Unless we have a new demarcation of constituencies, we will not give representation to the people who have been transformed by some of the economic and social changes that have been going on for the last 2 decades, because they are not enfranchised. The rural part of Pakistan is overrepresented in parliament, and urban Pakistan is underrepresented in parliament. That's the first fundamental reality. The second fundamental reality is that if you were to do this change of electoral constituencies, you will allow space to be opened for newer parties, which are urban-based and perhaps more representative of Pakistan's growing middle class. That's something that I talk about in my book. And I don't, for a moment, mean that it's a monolithic social class, but the middle class has been growing in numbers and in assertiveness, but they don't have a political voice of the kind that they need. And I would say that the ticketing policies of the existing political parties would have to change to bring about this, to make Pakistan's political system more responsive to the changing political landscape of the country. Unless the political parties, through their own self-interest, are able to see that this change is going to work to their benefit. And how would it work to their benefit? That if they change the ticketing policies to bring in the expertise that they clearly need to govern Pakistan, because Pakistan cannot be governed in the old way. Politics as usual cannot deliver governance of the kind that is required, nor can it deliver solutions to the daunting challenges that Pakistan faces, whether they're challenges of security or of solvency. But these all need now expertise, knowledge, people who have experience, and the political parties don't have those people. Therefore, for their own interest, they need to change. Mia Nawaz Sharif, who's the alternate, the prime minister in waiting, he heads an urban party. I think, in a way, his party and the MQM are both urban-based parties, are in the best position to bring about this change. Now, whether they do so or they don't do so, and I'm not advocating, I don't belong to any political party, and that should answer your question too. Don't speak for anybody, don't belong to any political party. I'm a citizen of Pakistan. I had an opportunity to serve my country. I did, under different administrations, but I owe my loyalty only to the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, not to individuals. Never saw it that way, never did it that way. So I think at the end of the day, it's also for Pakistan's citizens to make themselves more assertive, to ensure that they're active enough now that they have the means that they never had before. I mean, you have a microphone now. You get onto a microphone, and it's the most empowering experience, because through that you're able to, especially in an illiterate society where there's not a great deal of other entertainment going on also. Television is huge in Pakistan. Its influence is phenomenal. Quite unlike perhaps even the kind of influence television has in neighboring India, for all sorts of perhaps other reasons. But it's huge because there are weak institutions in Pakistan also, weak political institutions, unlike India. So the role of the media is much larger than what you see in any neighboring country, or perhaps even in any other developing countries. It's very vibrant, it's very active, but therein lies perhaps an instrument that can be leveraged by those who wish to see Pakistan change into a modern, functional republic.
The next two people on my list, the gentleman here, are followed by the lady there. Yes.
Mohammed Waziri, Persian Service, BBC World Service. Well, a comment and also followed by a question. The comment is that the central theme of your speech was on Pakistan making through crisis. Well, unfortunately, it seems that has become part of a psyche of the politicians and everybody there, or maybe in that part of the world, and that has become a routine. So therefore, that becomes a problem by itself. Therefore, there won't be any chance to resolve issues. That's the comment. The question is this: do you agree still with the comment that Pakistan is still, after 60 years of since its birth, in search of an identity? Is an Islamic state, or is it sort of a secular state, or the paradoxes that we can see throughout Pakistan in various parts, the urban parts you mentioned, and also the village? Thank you.
Hi, Lindsay Hilson from Channel 4 News. I've just come back from a few days in Abbottabad, as you may know. And I think that you're right that this insider-outsider perspective is very different. So I want you to explain to me two of the things that I observed. First was almost everybody I met outside the bin Laden house told me that he hadn't been there, it was a conspiracy, it wasn't true. None of it was true. And the second was on the issue of shame. Shame was mentioned a lot, and I realized after a couple of days that the shame wasn't that bin Laden had been living there in their midst, apparently undetected. It was the shame that the Americans had managed to breach Pakistan's air defenses and come in and do this covert raid without Pakistani military knowing. It seems to me that those two perspectives are very different from the way it looks from the outside, so maybe you could explain that to us.
Lindsay, good to see you. I'm glad you were in Pakistan. So were most of my friends, which is why I missed out on meeting a number of them in London. All of them had gone to Pakistan to report or to write their briefs. I think let me address your attention to another dimension of the reaction. Many times it was said by people, including sometimes Pakistani authorities themselves, unattributed, that, the death of Osama bin Laden would lead to such a severe reaction because, polling has shown that this is a very popular figure. There were polls that showed. I just wonder what happened to those polls. There was no reaction in Pakistan of the kind that people had predicted. In fact, there was an enormous amount of relief. Yes, this other dimension, and I think that is something that will concern Pakistanis, that you can have your defenses breached in this manner by an ostensible ally. It's a fair, legitimate question on the minds of people. But that doesn't translate or convert into any sympathy. Osama bin Laden and his organization were responsible for thousands of deaths in Pakistan, thousands of people being widowed and orphaned. And I think there's a very strong recognition of that. In fact, if any of those polls were correct, I just wonder how, their polling techniques, they really need to go back. I don't want to name the polling organization. They really need to go back and check their polling techniques. And also, they must learn to distinguish between sometimes people posture when they give a reply because they're angry at something. Depends when you're polling and what you're polling and the nature of the question. But I asked those people who had said there'd be this, all of Pakistan, especially with this growing extremism in Pakistan, and this man being this iconic figure, according to the poll. I'm not describing this in my words. Well, where's that reaction? There isn't one. The reaction is more a sense of outrage. I think on two counts. You may have met people living around that residence, but I think you pick up any newspaper in any language in Pakistan, English, Sindhi, Urdu, and see what the columnists are writing and what they're asking. What they're asking is, how was he able to live in this place for such a long period of time? We need to know from you. We're not suggesting there's any, as I was saying before, any complicity, but we would like an answer. And if there were, as the authorities have now acknowledged, gaps in our intelligence, well, then there will need to be accountability. So I think if those voices, it's important to also identify these voices in Pakistan, which are numerous. I'm not talking about just one or two voices which are saying that. Now, as for this notion of, shame and, I think the issue of sovereignty is a very fundamental one for any nation. It shouldn't surprise anybody. It really shouldn't surprise anybody. The sense that, people can penetrate your defenses leads to legitimate questions that are asked and are being asked. And I hope the Prime Minister in his speech will be able to provide some answers. But if he doesn't, people will still insist on those answers. And they will also insist on wanting to know how these defenses can be strengthened in the future to prevent any external unilateral intrusion of Pakistan's airspace. It's fair enough. That's a fair point. So I will leave it there, Lindsay.
Hey, was there an earlier question from this side of the room? No. Okay. So let me. It's okay. So let me go to yes, Timothy, yes, please, and followed by yourself, please. Sure.
Vipul Thakur, member of the institution. Pakistan's tax to GDP ratio is only about 9%, one of the lowest in the world. As you mentioned, that Pakistan's rich people, MPs, feudal, agriculture, estates, whatever, they don't pay any taxes. Not only that, what is actually worse is every few years, loans given to well-connected and top business people are just written off. I think 2 years back, actually, when Prime Minister's wife, who runs a business, she had a large loan just written off. Why should international community give money to Pakistan where most of the funds are used and abused?
I think let me quickly go, because it's a short answer. First of all, it's for the international community to determine. It doesn't give money because it's the great charity giver. It gives money because it buys leverage. So let's not make any mistakes about why international assistance comes to a country. It doesn't come for altruistic reasons. And it's the prerogative of the international actor, whoever it may be, whether it rather, not he, it's a determination for them to make. We in Pakistan are really consumed now by, as I was saying to you, a debate and a discourse where we're saying it is not fair to put the tax burden on a small. It's not as if nobody pays tax. Our question is about the equity of the tax system. I pay tax. I'm a salaried middle-class professional, and I pay tax. Pakistan's manufacturing and the captains of industry pay a huge amount of tax. It's agriculture and the services sector that doesn't. So I think, one, we must be clear in not indicting the entire country, and then coming to a conclusion where you make those people pay. In a way, you see, if you advocate a course of action, which is the line of, in a way, the line of reasoning where you were going, was that why should the international community pay, and it should stop then. So as I explained to you, first of all, it doesn't give it for altruistic reasons. Let's be very clear. Interstate relations are not about charity. It's about buying influence. Whether it buys influence or not buys influence is a different matter. You could certainly do an analysis because you know the old Beatles song, money can't buy love. There's also that dimension. But I think within Pakistan, one must differentiate between an action that punishes the wrong people and allows those to get away scot-free, who actually have the most in terms of they're the ones who should really have the burden of taxation rather than. So, you don't want to end up advocating a course of action that punishes the wrong people. Let me end it there.
Great. I have 4 more people on the list, and we're running short of time. So if anyone, in addition to the 4 people, would like to ask a question or make a comment, this is the time to catch my eye. Yes, please.
I'm George Lambrakis, retired American diplomat. Used to work with Pakistan once upon a time. I wanted to get this question in because it's kind of a follow-up perhaps to the previous question. You are making a very strong case for the importance of the common man getting the elite to do the right thing. Your field is perhaps international rather than domestic politics. You're suggesting that domestic politics will cure whatever problems we may be seeing with Pakistan. At the same time, what we see on the world's press is every time anything happens, great popular unrest, anti-Americanism all over the place. We know that the elite has great trouble containing this and cooperating with not just the United States, but the world community. They have to hide it very often. You didn't directly answer the question of Musharraf a little while ago.
I can't really answer for him because I have no idea what his plans are.
Well, I know, and I'm not particularly interested in any particular individual, but just how do you see this outbreak of popular wrath making a difference, and particularly in international affairs where it would appear to be a question of education that takes a long time if the popular will is to be done. Thank you.
Let me take another one with that, yes.
Yes. My name is Mudassir Malik, and I represent, I suppose, the resilient part of the civil society in Pakistan, because I've been living there for the last 20 years through the trials and tribulations. And the first point I'd like to make is that in addition, I suppose, to the frustration that we feel with our dysfunctional government, is as part of the business community, the frustration that we feel with the international media and how day in and day out we see both Pakistan as well as Islam being demonized on the airways on every single pretext that of any incident that takes place anywhere in the world. And I think that should be a point of central conversation and debate, and I think that several voices should be brought to the table to discuss and assess how and what sort of impact, negative impact it has on civil society and the kind of frustrations that it causes in positive, to the positive forces in parts of Pakistan. The second thing that I would like to highlight is that in the context of an economy, Pakistan is a population of 170 million people. The country is the 6th largest population in the world. It also has a workforce of 50 million people, which is the 10th largest workforce in the world. Despite the fact that it is the 10th largest workforce in the world, it constitutes about less than 1% of global trade and global trade GDP output. The point that I'm trying to highlight over here is that in relation to the point that Maleeha was making, that contemporary recent events have made in recent events of Pakistan regarding Osama bin Laden, there hasn't really been a popular outcry. There isn't really a sense of popular support, and that these 50 million people who work day in, day out are people who do not want anything other than education, healthcare, security, and for their children to grow up in a safe place. And it is not very difficult for people in the international community to understand what it takes to bring that about. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your question. I think your question is about anti-Americanism in Pakistan. And you're absolutely right. The level of anti-Americanism is very high. But you know, there are historical reasons for this. I don't wish to go into all the reasons, but I will say 2 or 3 things. One, that at the moment there's a mirror image. I think the low opinion ordinary people have in America, I'm just coming from the United States. I know the United States reasonably well. I spent some years there. In a way, the nations are sort of, returning the compliment to each other. Both, there's a mirror image, both have a very low opinion of the other. Both countries feel they gave so much and got so little. And I think this is the problem in a way that has to be, this is a circle that has to be squared. How do we kind of get past this? Because clearly the 2 countries have strategic objectives in common. Both would like to see an end to terrorism. One may feel that the other doesn't do enough, but I don't think there is any doubt about its commitment to a goal. Maybe the way it goes about achieving that goal may be different. Its tactical divergences may be there, but there's no dispute over the strategic goal. So I think the need for the 2 countries to actually get along with each other is much greater today than perhaps it was 20 years ago. That being so, there is a need, therefore, to deal with the publics in both sides. The US administration also needs to address the problem on its side, as indeed the Pakistani government needs to do on its side. And because the burden of history is strong in this, and I will cite just 1 or 2 reasons for the growth of anti-Americanism in Pakistan. I mean, the first is obviously, this flip-flop nature of the relationship and the fact that the US disengaged for a long period of time, rather abruptly, after the end of the Cold War. So I think the 10-year period of sanctions under which Pakistan was, and there were several layers of sanctions, it went from the most allied ally of the United States to its most sanctioned friend. We know that. That has very deep embedded in Pakistani psyche. The second is, I think Pakistan as a Muslim country has responded quite similar to how other Muslim countries have responded over a period of time. to US policies and conduct in the Middle East. And this has to do with its policies and its stance on Israel and the lack of even-handedness in its Middle East policy. This is also very deep in the Pakistani psyche. So Pakistanis respond as Pakistanis and as Muslims, as part of a larger Muslim community in the world. These are some of the realities, and I think the more the US is able to, in a way, recognize some of these and work at it, and I think we've had, for example, Secretary Clinton, somebody I greatly admire, say not long ago in a congressional hearing that the US made a strategic blunder in disengaging and then withdrawing suddenly from Afghanistan back in 1989, 1990, and that the whole sanctions period was a big mistake. Now, these are important admissions which clearly, over a period of time, will have an impact. But I think anti-Americanism and, and as I said, the mirror image on the American side, this is something that has to be addressed, but cannot be addressed. There's no magic bullet.
My question was, how does your way of addressing it by popular rage
I see. Okay.
make a difference in this case?
I think we need to do both. I am concerned in changing my country before I can change the world, to be very honest with you. What matters to me, just like what matters to most of you, depending on which country you belong to, is how your country prospers and how your country fares. That's my concern. I hope from that, and I don't think, I may have spent time in diplomacy, but I've actually spent more time studying, analyzing, and being engaged in national issues and national life in Pakistan. So I'm certainly not an overseas resident who spent time abroad, and international politics has brought me back to domestic politics. Actually, it's quite the other way around. It was domestic that took me to international. And I think if we can get the domestic right, first of all, as a Pakistani citizen, that's what I'm concerned with, primarily and fundamentally. I think if we can get that right, if we can square many of the circles, resolve many of our dilemmas, and I have to say, somebody asked a question about identity, and I would recommend a very good chapter in this book written by Mohsin Hamid, who says identity is one of the most overrated things, which is very much an outsider perspective. For an ordinary Pakistani, even though the debates over religion is a different matter, but the whole issue of is Pakistan, do Pakistanis really know who they are? Well, surprise, surprise, yes we do. We always have. It's just the outsider brought his own or her own prism and sort of saw us in those terms, but we didn't. So I would recommend that. He's a young novelist, award-winning novelist, who's written an extraordinarily thoughtful chapter on issues like identity and optimism about Pakistan.
Let me take the last two questions. Yes, the gentleman there, followed by the gentleman there. Yes, please. We're getting microphones to you.
You can do without a microphone.
And, yeah.
I'm William Ward, London correspondent of Il Foglio of Italy, which is a leading daily highbrow think sheet, or at least tries to be. You haven't mentioned in your otherwise fascinating and wide-ranging talk, I haven't heard you mention the initials ISI, and I'd be very interested to hear a little more from you about the various strands or currents within the ISI and how they are currently affecting, or as you see it in the future will affect government, particularly international policy. And I'd like to have a little bit of your insight in relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan, which seem puzzling to outsiders, and indeed something about current relations between Islamabad and Beijing.
Well, that's quite a lot. Yes, the last question, the gentleman there. Just go ahead.
Hi, I'm Danny Kemp, correspondent for AFP news agency. I lived and worked in Pakistan for years and visited Abbottabad a number of times. In fact, the military took us for tea there one day on the way back from Kashmir. And I know obviously there's a very heavy military presence there. As I know from my own experience, just wondered if I could push you to explain why you think or how you can be so sure there's no official complicity, and if so, whether also to ask you what you think of the idea that rogue or retired elements of the security services may have been involved, even if there's no absolute official involvement.
Thank you. In 2 minutes, because we're ending, but the discussion carry on after the formal talk ends.
Well, I think, Look, my own, when you say why are you so sure, that's my own judgment. But I think it's the outcome of an inquiry that will determine how is it, as I said, there were intelligence gaps, and why were these intelligence gaps not plugged? So I will leave that. If it was not the subject of an ongoing inquiry, I think it would be really pointless to sit and speculate here. And then speculate with the view of rushing to judgment and condemning all of Pakistan, which I find, frankly, unfair, unacceptable, and unjust. And there's just too much of that around. They must have known, they must have. I mean, frankly, who are you to say they must have known and they must have? I would wait for the outcome of the inquiry, but my own judgment tells me that an organization that brought so much grief to Pakistan, the leader of that organization would hardly be somebody that anyone, whether within the intelligence agency that you wanted me to address, my topic was not the intelligence agencies of Pakistan. It's not my concern. My concern was the broader challenges that Pakistan faces and the broader issues that Pakistan faces. So, if you want me to speak on the security agency of Pakistan, I'm happy for Rahul to schedule me with another talk that we can discuss this. But I do think that there are trends in Pakistan, and I think these go underreported and underappreciated, and I wanted to draw some attention to those trends which are making governments more accountable. We're not there yet, but there are forces at work, there are trends which are discernible now, which are leading to a certain conclusion or a certain outcome. We may not get there easily or quickly, but my purpose today really was to, in a way, address attention to what is never really the focus of any outside audience. The focus is terrorism. Where did you find him? How did you find him? How did you not find him? These are important questions. I'm not for a moment taking away from the current news value of these questions, and I think you ask many legitimate and valid questions. But for Pakistan, I wanted you to get a slice of life in Pakistan from somebody who actually lives there, not a policy wonk in a think tank. With great respect, my friend Rahul, but from somebody, because that's not the nature of his job. The nature of his job is different. But from somebody who lives there, who's been engaged and involved in that country's diplomacy and politics and journalism, and for you to get really a sense of the flavor from somebody who's observed things that may not have been observed by outsiders. That was the purpose of this talk. Now, whether the relationship with Afghanistan, very quickly I will answer. I think we're on the brink, regardless of what happened last week. I think, in fact, that the United States and Pakistan have more convergent objectives now than ever before in Afghanistan, because I'm just coming from Washington, and I get a very strong sense of the Obama administration having taken a decision to shift from a military to a political strategy and to pursue the path of reconciliation within Afghanistan, to make sure that down the road the war in Afghanistan ends by a political settlement. I think there is recognition of Pakistan's pivotal role in bringing about and helping the Afghans, not to get ahead of the Afghans by any means. And I think we've seen recognition of all of this in our recent exchanges between Pakistan and Afghanistan, particularly President Karzai's repeated requests to Pakistan, and now the setting up of a new peace kind of a structure for this peace and reconciliation effort to get underway. A recognition of Pakistan playing a very important role in helping bring this long, protracted war to an end. I mean, I heard in the first 48 hours that I was in Washington after bin Laden's killing, I heard obviously voices within, especially the Democratic Party, asking for a quicker withdrawal from Afghanistan. So I won't comment on how this will play out. This is for something, this is for the American media to track. But I think President Obama, by the national security changes that he's brought about in his team, he's already signaling where he wants to go. We think in Pakistan that this makes US objectives much more convergent with Pakistan than they have been for many years. And I think, nobody asked this question, but I'm happy to answer this. And I think this may provide a way for Pakistan and the United States to start mending the relationship that is clearly in such disarray at the moment. That Afghanistan may prove, ironically, interestingly, paradoxically, the arena where the two countries will be able to perhaps pursue convergent objectives, which does bring the war in Afghanistan to an end through a political settlement, which is led by the Afghans, negotiated by the Afghans themselves with help from others, but really led by them. It's their country, they must decide what they want to. But to the extent that President Karzai has asked for Pakistan's help, Pakistan is obviously able and willing to do this. So I'll end on that sort of note of quasi-optimism that one, it's not over yet. And two, this is a relationship which is much too critical. It'll take a long time to repair, no question about it. And maybe it never really gets repaired to the extent that we would like it to, because there are two countries and their objectives don't always converge. That's fair enough. How can you have two countries which have identical objectives? I think even the United Kingdom and the United States oftentimes, in fact, they've disagreed on how to proceed in Afghanistan many a time. We know that. We sitting in Pakistan hear all about that. But I think we are on the brink of something very important, which will get underway in Afghanistan over the next few months. And I think that provides an opportunity for the two countries to begin to come back to the same page. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just end by actually recommending this book. I mean, there have been several questions, some of which I think the answers are in this book, including chapters on army and politics, battling militancy, retooling institutions. So I suspect is a very, and I've gone through, is a very, very useful book to read to understand Pakistan better, particularly in the context of the current crisis and the future developments. On that note, I'd like to thank Dr. Lodhi for coming here and speaking to us, and for a fascinating insight into Pakistan by someone who actually lives and breathes Pakistan day in and day out. Thank you very much.